Number 3, number 4, inside Kinnick Stadium. What a matchup this is going to be. We are now officially one day removed from Iowa's matchup with the number 4 ranked team in the country in the Penn State Nittany Lions, and undoubtedly, one of the biggest questions Iowa fans have is how good is Penn State's defense actually, and will Iowa be able to move the ball on offense at all in this game? So let's go ahead and address that question head on. Now, one thing we know about Penn State coming into this game is that their defense, much like Iowa's, is highly regarded on a national level, and understandably so. You know, on defense for Penn State, the best way to describe them is as being hyper aggressive, unorthodox with their blitzes, unique with their zone coverage shells, and even unorthodox with how they utilize some of their more versatile players. And on the back end for this defense, they're not afraid to line up in press man coverage because they have confident, physical corners with length on the outside in the form of Castro-Fields and sophomore Joey Porter Jr. And at nickel, sophomore Daquan Hardy is a quick player with very impressive mirroring skills who could make life hell for guys like Charlie Jones and Nico Roganey in this matchup. And when you look at the defensive line, this may not be one of the better Penn State defensive lines that we've grown accustomed to seeing when Penn State is being this highly regarded. But they still have some notable guys up front in the form of Jesse Luketa, who operates as both a defensive end, inside linebacker, and overall wild card for this defense. Very fun player to watch. And they also have a pass rushing specialist in the form of Arnold Ebiketie and a massive run stuffing extraordinaire in PJ Mustipher, who comes in listed at 6'4", 323 pounds. And trust me, he looks every single bit of that listing. All that said, this Penn State defense looks exploitable at linebacker if you're Iowa, because although they have a couple veteran guys in that group, they're not strong at the point of attack. And what Penn State has shown over the years is that if you're willing to run the ball out of spaced out spread looks, they're willing to play that with 5-man boxes that feature only one linebacker in between the tackles. And more often than not this season, that linebacker has been number 12 Brandon Smith, who, as I mentioned earlier, is not strong at the point of attack, and he lives on his athleticism to avoid engagements with climbing offensive linemen. And that's where a guy like Linderbaum really comes into play, because there's been a handful of times already this season where climbing centers specifically have given Brandon Smith issues, and the guy who will be engaging quite a bit with him in this game will be one of the most athletic offensive linemen, let alone centers, you're going to find in college football today. And he's also a guy whose technique is so refined that he really doesn't miss when it comes to at least making contact with second-level players out in space. And if you rewind it back 2 years ago to 2019, a big issue for Iowa in that loss to Penn State was winning that engagement with strength at the point of attack. So even though Penn State was willing to play those light boxes against Iowa, a team that everybody knows is trying to run the ball, they still made it work because they were just winning those engagements. And yes, that's a young Tyler Linderbaum getting knocked back there, but he's come such a long way in that respect. And for Penn State, the strength of their current linebackers shown on initial contact is not up to par with what we saw from that 2019 group. All that said, Penn State's defense from a structure perspective is as good and as creative as you're going to find. And they can line up the same personnel snap by snap in a variety of different positions. And with that personnel, Penn State loves to generate pressure off the edge with their athleticism, and they love to unload the clip with blitzes to generate pressure and honestly just muster up a bunch of chaos. And the thing with how Penn State blitzes is that they're willing to hit you from so many unique angles. And this play is a fantastic example of what their defense forces you to adjust to. Because if we take a look at their alignment here pre-snap, and let's just pretend like we're Spencer Petras and we're Tyler Linderbaum going through our checks on this play, there are a few things that immediately stand out. First, we notice that the defensive line alignment on this play is a bit peculiar because it's not alignment that they typically show you, as their base personnel on the field kind of looks like they're going to have 4 down defensive linemen, with the far weak side lineman being lined up as a 4-eye defensive end, which just means that he's shaded on the inside shoulder of that left tackle, which is an unusual alignment for this defense. And in reaction to that, Auburn suspects that there might be a blitz coming off the outside here from one of these 2 players, because unless that 4-eye defensive end drops out away from the line of scrimmage, he's going to be beefing up that inside pressure most likely and opening up a blitz lane to the outside. So what Auburn does is essentially make a check to the left tackle to basically play a zone. And once that ball gets snapped, he operates as a free player and he's able to pick up any potential blitzer off the edge, which is likely to be this linebacker in particular, number 12, Brandon Smith. And if he doesn't come, then the left tackle would tighten his alignment and assist left guard. No problem. And as we go through this play, Brandon Smith does end up blitzing here, and unexpectedly so does number 13 in sort of a tightly run wraparound style blitz from the middle of the defense with about 4 yards of depth. And this is about as clean as you can possibly see it from an execution standpoint. With Brandon Smith, he's intentionally widening that gap between the left tackle and left guard by coming at such a wide angle. And at the same time, you see that 4-eye defensive end collapsing down into that left guard, occupying him and preventing him from recognizing the blitz and picking it up. And ultimately, this is something that really comes down to the interior offensive line being able to see the whole field and recognizing the blitz and then effectively communicating it. And this is something Iowa will have to adjust to throughout this game in regards to pass protection. And there have been times this season where Iowa has struggled in that regard as far as communication goes. And part of that is because there are a lot of new faces on the O-line who are still getting acclimated. But regardless, communication needs to be a strong point this weekend if you're Iowa. And there isn't a guy in college football I'd rather have in the middle of my offense than Tyler Linderbaum. And he alone provides such a massive advantage for the Iowa Hawkeyes. There will be times in this game where Iowa quarterback Spencer Petras is taken off his progressions because this secondary and linebacking core drop into some really unique zone shells all over the field. And they have a lot of athletic, versatile guys who pre-snap may not look like they're going to drop into a zone shell, but then end up doing so, or vice versa. They might look like they're setting up for a zone, but then they immediately tee off once the ball snapped and crash towards that line of scrimmage. And that's not even to re-mention the fact that Penn State's athleticism, length, physicality, and talent at defensive back will create problems for Iowa wide receivers in this game at some point, just as far as separation is concerned. That said, when Petras does get put in those spots, we need to see poise from him and not the out of structure panic that we've seen from him at times over his tenure as starter. And most of that came last season, and he's made a lot of growth in that area this year. All that being said, there's a silver lining when you look at how Iowa's offense stacks up against this Penn State defense. And with Iowa on offense, they have good pieces that are in the right places to be successful. Obviously moving the ball isn't going to come easy against a team like Penn State. But if I was able to execute sound exchanges on zone runs and get Tyler Linderbaum, Kyler Schott, and Connor Colby out in space, Iowa will find success on the ground in this game, undoubtedly. And in addition to that, expect to see Iowa ask their receivers to run a fair amount of double moves against Penn State. Because although they're immensely talented on the back end, obviously, we've been talking about it all video, anytime you have a team who runs a large amount of man coverage, they're going to be susceptible to double moves at times. And you're bound to catch defensive backs at some point face guarding too heavily. And not finding the ball, which has burnt Penn State at times this season. And, you know, it's easier said than done, but Iowa's offense has a recipe for success on offense, and as long as they do their part to minimize turnovers and effectively get their linemen out in space, it's definitely a possibility to see Iowa put up a fair amount of points in this game. I just want to thank all of you for tuning in for yet another video. In case you haven't noticed, I've been trying to step up my content for this channel as of late, and that's largely because all of you continue to show love with your comments and on the like button, through subscriptions, and especially on social media. That's been one of my favorite parts of it. It means more to me than you could possibly ever know, and I'm going to keep churning out as much content as I possibly can for all of you, but this Saturday is going to be a fun game, and games like this don't come around all that often, so make sure you're soaking it in. Wake up early for Fox's game day show. Get together with your buddies and just enjoy the moment, because Iowa football is a lot of fun right now, and just ride the wave. All that being said, I will see you all in a future video. Take it easy.